The Galactic Union had existed for millennia. It was a massive coalition of advanced species, each with its own culture, technology, and way of life, but united under a single governing body. The Union had its own language, its own set of laws, and a unique form of diplomacy that balanced the needs of dozens of species. Above all, the Union valued restraint, patience, and the careful deliberation of every decision. When Earth was first invited to join, the humans were both honored and cautious. It was a historic moment, a chance to access technology and knowledge that could solve Earth's most pressing problems: food shortages, climate change, dwindling resources. Humanity prepared itself for what they expected would be a dynamic exchange of ideas, technology, and solutions. But the reality was far different. The humans quickly realized that the Union's decision-making process was like nothing they'd ever seen. Time moved at an excruciatingly slow pace in the Union. Proposals would take years, sometimes decades, to be fully approved. A plan that a human might consider urgent could be tabled for consideration only to be revisited generations later. This was the pace of interstellar politics, a reflection of the lifespans and temperaments of species who thought in centuries. The first few years were an exercise in patience for the humans. They sent delegates to the Union headquarters, a massive structure orbiting a star in neutral space. Their representatives, trained in diplomacy and cultural sensitivity, quickly adapted to the customs of the council. They wore the elaborate robes required by tradition, learned the slow, deliberate speech patterns of the elder species, and even adopted the carefully neutral body language expected in council chambers. But while the humans adapted outwardly, inside they simmered. Ambassador Rachel Park had been Earth's primary representative to the Union since the beginning. She was a skilled diplomat, known for her calm demeanor and her ability to navigate Earth's own political waters. But nothing had prepared her for the endless council meetings, each one slower and more excruciating than the last. Today, she was meeting with the council regarding a new petition, a request for urgent assistance with Earth's food shortages. Over the past few years, crop failures, extreme weather, and overpopulation had pushed Earth to the brink. With the Union's help, Earth could quickly solve these crises. Union technology could enhance crop yields, purify water, even help terraform parts of the planet for sustainable farming. And the technology to do this was readily available. It existed somewhere within the Union's vast repositories. As Rachel sat in the council chamber, she looked around at the gathered representatives of dozens of species. Elder Slarks of the Melior species presided over the meeting, his slow, resonant voice setting the tone. The Meliors were one of the oldest species in the Union, known for their long lives and deliberative nature. Slarks himself was rumored to be over 1,000 Earth years old, and his perspective on time was so vast that human lifespans must have seemed like mere blinks in the cosmic timeline. Rachel took a deep breath, centering herself before she began. She'd been through this process many times before. She knew every word, every movement of her body had to be controlled, calm, and measured to avoid offending the elder species. Esteemed council members, she began, her voice steady. Earth has faced severe challenges over the past decades. Our climate has shifted unpredictably. Food production is struggling to meet the demands of our population, and fresh water is becoming increasingly scarce. We petitioned the Council for the approval of technology that would allow us to cultivate new food sources and stabilize our environment. She paused, allowing her words to sink in, watching the subtle reactions of her alien counterparts. The reptilians had a habit of flicking their tongues when interested. The crystalline Alcarians emitted a faint hum when they were absorbing information. Rachel had trained herself to notice these signs, but today there was an almost universal indifference. Slarks looked at her slowly, his gaze weighing her words as though he could stretch time itself. Ambassador Park, he replied in his low, gravelly tone, "Your concern is understood. However, we must remind you that such measures require careful consideration." Rachel felt a pulse of frustration rise within her, but she kept her voice even. With respect, Elder Slarks, the people of Earth do not have the luxury of time. Our crisis is immediate. We believe that with the technology already available within the Union, we could address these issues and secure a stable future for our people. The elder paused, his eyes narrowing slightly, a motion that indicated displeasure. Ambassador Park, the Galactic Union is built on the principles of patience and prudence. We understand the urgency of your request, but every measure we take affects not only Earth but the balance of our entire Union. A rash decision could disrupt the peace we have carefully maintained. Rachel clenched her fists beneath the table. She had heard these words before, spoken in countless variations over the years. It was always about balance, about peace, about the needs of the Union as a whole. But no one seemed to grasp that Earth's needs were desperate. Elder Slarks, she continued, her voice tinged with a note of urgency. I assure you, the people of Earth respect the Union's ways. We have tried to adapt to them, to abide by your principles. But our situation grows worse with each passing month. Children are going hungry. Entire communities are without clean water. We ask for the chance to use the Union's resources to alleviate these hardships. The elder shifted slightly, his gaze steady and unyielding. Ambassador Park, as you know, the Union has numerous requests before it. Many worlds face hardships, and we must weigh each need carefully. The Council will take your request under consideration. A ripple of frustration passed through the human delegation seated behind Rachel. She could feel their silent anger, a reflection of her own. Earth had already waited. Years had passed since their initial request, and yet, every time, the Council responded with more delays. Rachel bowed her head, accepting the answer she'd expected but dreaded. Thank you, Elder Slarks. We appreciate the Council's consideration. The meeting adjourned, and Rachel rose from her seat, her calm demeanor masking the frustration that simmered beneath. As she stepped into the corridor outside the Council chamber, her advisor, Nathaniel, approached her. His face mirrored the exhaustion that all of them felt. Another delay, he said, his voice a whisper of disbelief. They'll deliberate for decades if we let them. Rachel sighed, looking out over the expanse of stars visible through the chamber windows. They don't understand. To them, time is infinite. They don't live in the world we do, where years pass in the blink of an eye. They can't see what it's like for us to watch our children grow up in hunger, to watch our planet suffer. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. How long can we keep doing this, Rachel? How long can we keep asking, begging for scraps of help? Rachel's gaze hardened. She could feel the tension building, not only within herself, but among her entire delegation. She knew they weren't alone. Back on Earth, people were growing restless, their patience eroding with every denial, every platitude. We keep asking, she replied, her voice barely concealing her anger. We keep asking because it's the only choice we have left. But Nathaniel, if they continue to deny us, we may have to take matters into our own hands. Her advisor looked at her, a flicker of something almost defiant in his eyes. If that day comes, I'll be standing beside you. As they walked down the corridor, Rachel felt the weight of her people's desperation pressing down on her, an invisible burden that had grown heavier with each passing year. She knew that humanity was at a breaking point, but she couldn't abandon hope. Not yet. Still, the simmering anger within her, and within every human who had endured the Union's dismissiveness, was growing. And she wasn't the only one who felt it. Throughout the delegation, among scientists, diplomats, and advisors, there was a sense of impatience, a sense of resolve that was unlike anything the Union had ever seen. Earth would continue to fight, to petition, to work within the rules. But for how much longer? In that moment, Rachel understood a simple, unavoidable truth. Humanity's patience was finite. And the Union, in its centuries-long existence, had never truly seen what could happen when humans reached their breaking point. Back in her quarters, Rachel reviewed her speech, determined to try again tomorrow. But deep down, a small, defiant voice whispered a question she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. What if we stopped waiting? Months passed, and humanity's requests for assistance continued to go unheard. Earth's ambassadors made every effort to work within the Galactic Union's framework, carefully crafting appeals, revising proposals, even trying to persuade individual council members in private meetings. But every approach was met with the same stony indifference. For the council members, this was routine. To the humans, it was a crisis. Rachel Park, Earth's ambassador, felt the weight of her people's desperation with every passing day. She couldn't bear to think of the reports she received regularly from Earth. Dried riverbeds, starving communities, cities struggling to maintain basic infrastructure. The knowledge that help existed, that the Union had the technology to solve these problems in mere months, made the Council's apathy even harder to accept. One evening, as Rachel sat in her quarters reviewing the latest rejection letter from the Council, Nathaniel, her advisor, entered, his face drawn with tension. "Rachel, I think it's time we talked about alternatives," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. Rachel glanced up, exhaustion lining her face. "Alternatives? There's no room for alternatives, Nathaniel. The Council controls all access to Union technology. If we act independently, they'll sanction us, or worse, cut us off entirely." Nathaniel's gaze was unwavering. "And if we keep waiting, people on Earth will die. I know you're trying to keep us within the rules, but maybe the rules don't work for us. Maybe it's time we consider other methods." A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Rachel knew what he meant. Over the years, humans had learned how to operate Union technology, mining ships, agricultural processors, environmental stabilizers, but they hadn't been allowed to deploy any of it for their own planet. The Council strictly controlled these resources, claiming it was to maintain balance within the Union. But now, she wondered if it was time to stop asking for permission. Rachel folded her hands, leaning back as she weighed his words. She had devoted her life to diplomacy, to building bridges, but the bridge she was trying to build now was collapsing. Earth was facing a future without hope, all because the Union refused to act quickly enough. The following day, Rachel returned to the Council chamber. This time, she wasn't there to ask for help. She was there to deliver a message, a final appeal, a warning. The Council chamber, an expansive room with walls made of shimmering metal that reflected the stars, was filled with representatives from dozens of species. All eyes were on her as she took her place at the podium, her face calm, but her eyes steely. "Esteemed Council members," she began, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Once again, I stand before you to ask for assistance on behalf of Earth. Our people are facing a crisis unlike any we have known. We need resources, food, water, and technology to help us restore balance to our ecosystems. We have presented our case in every format, followed every protocol, and made every attempt to work within the guidelines of the Union. And yet, we have received only delay after delay." She looked directly at Elder Slarks, the Council head, who watched her impassively from his elevated seat. The Melior Elder, known for his deep wisdom and patience, had become a symbol of everything Rachel had grown to resent about the Union's methods. He embodied a pace of action that the humans simply could not afford. "Ambassador Park," Slarks responded, his deep voice calm and measured. "The Council appreciates your concern. However, we have many issues before us, and every decision must be weighed carefully. Acting hastily could disrupt the balance we have worked so hard to maintain." Rachel's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Elder Slarks, I must be blunt. Earth is running out of time. Our people are suffering. We have waited patiently for your decision, but patience is a luxury we can no longer afford." The elder tilted his head slightly, regarding her with something that bordered on condescension. "Ambassador Park, you must understand that patience is a cornerstone of interstellar diplomacy. Acting with haste invites instability." For the first time, Rachel allowed her frustration to seep into her words. "Instability? My people are facing starvation, disease, and environmental collapse. What is more unstable than a world on the brink of ruin?" A murmur spread through the room, whispers passing between representatives. Humans were known for their passion, but it was rare for one to address the Council so directly. Yet Rachel continued, her voice rising with urgency. "If Earth does not receive aid soon, we will have no choice but to take action ourselves. We know where the resources are. We know how to operate the technology that could save our planet. If the Council will not act, we may be forced to bypass these delays and secure the resources on our own." Slark's eyes narrowed, his expression shifting to one of stern disapproval. "Ambassador Park, are you suggesting that Earth would act outside the authority of this council?" "I am suggesting," she replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly, "that Earth has a right to survive. We have been respectful. We have been patient. But if the Union will not recognize our needs, then we must look after ourselves." The chamber fell into shocked silence. No species had ever defied the Union so openly. The concept of independence, of acting without the Council's approval, was unheard of. For centuries, the Union had maintained order by ensuring that every species depended on it for stability. The idea that one might act unilaterally was a threat to everything the Union stood for. Another council member, a representative of the Terran species, spoke up, his voice laced with reproach. "Ambassador Park, the Union's authority must be respected. To act independently would be to undermine the balance we have carefully built." Rachel looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative, every species that had allowed their needs to go unaddressed. With respect, council members, balance means nothing to those who are starving. It means nothing to those who watch their children go hungry. The Union's methods may work for species who live for centuries, but humans do not have that time. We live in a world where every year matters. Slark's voice dropped to a cold, warning tone. "Ambassador Park, if Earth acts without authorization, the Council will be forced to take disciplinary measures. You risk not only your own world's standing, but also the peace of the Union." Rachel's gaze hardened, her decision firm. "I understand the consequences, Elder Slarks. But I will ask you once more. Will the Union act to help Earth, or must we help ourselves?" The silence in the chamber was profound, a tangible force pressing down on every being present. Slarks looked at her, his expression an unreadable mask. Finally he spoke, his words slow and deliberate. "The Council will deliberate and render its decision in due time." That was it. The same words, the same empty promise that they had heard for years. Rachel took a deep breath, knowing that this was the end of Earth's patience. She straightened, her voice unwavering. "Then so be it," she said. "We will do what we must." Without another word, she turned and left the chamber, her steps echoing through the vast hall. The human delegation followed her, their expressions resolute. Behind her, the representatives of the other species watched in stunned silence, realizing that they had just witnessed a moment that would change the course of history. As Rachel walked through the corridors of the Union headquarters, she could feel the weight of her decision settling over her. She had effectively declared Earth's independence from the Union, a move that would send ripples through the galaxy. But she knew it was the only choice left. Humanity could not wait any longer. They had tried diplomacy, they had tried patience, but now they would act. When she reached the human embassy, she called a meeting with the delegation and her top advisors. The room was tense, every face solemn. She looked at them, each of them representing the will and determination of Earth, each of them ready to do what was necessary. "Today, we made a choice," she said, her voice steady. "We have spent years waiting, asking, hoping for the Union to recognize our needs. But they have refused to act. Now, we will take matters into our own hands. We will gather the resources we need, and we will not ask for permission." Nathaniel spoke up, his face fierce with pride. "We're with you, Ambassador. Earth's survival is worth any risk." A murmur of agreement passed through the room, a shared sense of purpose that transcended words. They knew what this meant. There would be consequences, but the human spirit had been tested before, and they had always found a way to survive. Rachel nodded, a determined fire in her eyes. "Then let it be known," she said, her voice filled with quiet strength. "Humanity will no longer wait. We will no longer beg for survival. We will secure our own future, and we will do it on our own terms." In the days that followed, news of Earth's defiance spread throughout the Union. Species who had once dismissed humanity as impatient and reckless began to see them in a new light. For the first time, the galaxy understood what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. And as the Union struggled to respond, every species realized one undeniable truth. No species would ever forget the moment. In the weeks that followed Earth's departure from the Galactic Union Council chambers, the galaxy held its breath. Humanity had stepped out of line, defied the age-old protocols of the Union, and now the galaxy's response was uncertain. The other species had watched the humans with growing respect and a hint of fear as they began deploying their plans. In the days immediately following the Council's final refusal, Earth had moved quickly. Under Ambassador Rachel Park's guidance, humans began to operate like a well-oiled machine. Fleet commanders, engineers, scientists, and strategists convened in an effort unlike anything seen on Earth before. Every human resource was mobilized, and Earth's best minds collaborated to enact a plan that would allow humanity to sustain itself without Union assistance. A group of small human ships began dispatching to various points around the galaxy, targeting unclaimed planets and asteroids that were rich in resources. Mining drones landed on barren moons to extract essential minerals, while agricultural vessels harvested algae and vegetation from fertile, uninhabited worlds. These were resources the Union could have freely provided, but since they had refused, humanity was now willing to take what it needed. But their actions didn't go unnoticed. Elder Slarks and the Council members watched with dismay as the humans began extracting resources without Union approval. To the Council, this was an affront, an act that defied the very principles of interstellar peace and collaboration. In their view, humans were acting recklessly, destabilizing the careful balance that had held the galaxy together for millennia. In an emergency session, the Council gathered to discuss humanity's actions and determine the consequences. Tensions ran high as representatives from each species argued over what response was warranted. "We must act swiftly," declared Vartalon, a representative of the Scarax, an insectoid species known for their strict adherence to protocol. "The humans have disrespected our laws. If we do nothing, it will be seen as weakness, and other species may follow their example." Another representative, a tall, crystalline being from the Delcarian Consortium, spoke with a voice like glass breaking. "Humanity is acting out of desperation. Their actions are misguided, but not malicious. We should extend a final warning, offering them a chance to return to the fold." Elder Slarks listened in silence, his face expressionless. But those who knew him well could see the tension in his ancient eyes. Humanity had been a puzzle to him since their arrival, a young, passionate species that burned with the urgency of their short lives. In their defiance, he saw not only rebellion, but something else, a hunger for survival that was nearly unfamiliar to the long-lived species of the Union. Ambassador Park made her position clear, Slarks finally said, his deep voice silencing the chamber. "Humanity feels that they have been abandoned. We did not heed their warnings, and now they are acting out of necessity." Vartalon bristled, clicking his mandibles in irritation. "But Elder Slarks, they are acting independently. No species has ever acted in such a way. If we allow this, the entire structure of the Union could fall apart." Slarks' gaze was distant as he considered the Scarax's words. "And yet if we bring force against them, we risk something far worse. Humans are resilient, determined. They will not surrender willingly." "But Elder," another representative argued, "if we do nothing, we are setting a dangerous precedent." After hours of deliberation, the Council arrived at a decision. They would send a fleet of Union ships to Earth, not to attack, but to enforce a blockade around their planet, to contain humanity's actions and prevent further unauthorized resource gathering. The message was clear. Humanity would face isolation until they agreed to return to the Union's authority. Back on Earth, humanity had anticipated the blockade. Their networks had intercepted communications from the Council, and it was clear that the Union was growing restless. Rachel, standing on Earth's makeshift interstellar command center, watched the Union fleet's approach with a grim sense of inevitability. Nathaniel, her advisor, was by her side. "They're trying to intimidate us, Rachel," he said, eyes narrowing. "They think they can break us by cutting us off. Rachel nodded, her expression hard. They still don't understand. We've been isolated before. We've faced challenges without anyone's help. They think they can bring us to our knees, but they're wrong. This blockade changes nothing. Across Earth's new fleet, humans were preparing. Engineers were fortifying ships, equipping them with shields, and developing cloaking technology to evade Union sensors. The Union ships may have been larger and more advanced, but humanity's ingenuity had always been its greatest asset. With limited resources, they adapted, modified, and created solutions that the Union had never seen before. As the Union blockade took position around Earth, Rachel called a council of her own, a gathering of human leaders, military commanders, scientists, and strategists. They gathered in a war room, screens flashing with images of the Union fleet as it formed a ring around their planet. "Our options are limited," one of the fleet commanders said. "They'll try to starve us out, cut us off from accessing the resources we need. But if we can maintain our operations and gather enough supplies before the blockade tightens, we can survive this." Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice steady. "If we're going to make a stand, it has to be now. We need to show the Union that we won't submit, that Earth is prepared to survive with or without their help." Rachel nodded, her gaze resolute. "They think they can contain us, but we've faced far worse. Every human here has sacrificed too much to give in now. This blockade is their last attempt to bring us to heel, but we will not break. We'll show them that Earth is capable of standing on its own." With that, humanity went into action. Mining drones on distant asteroids continued to operate under the radar, evading Union patrols. Cloaked ships slipped past the blockade, gathering critical resources. Humanity's scientists worked tirelessly, developing new technologies, experimenting with sustainable solutions that would allow Earth to thrive even under the Union's restrictions. Days turned to weeks, and the Union blockade remained in place. But Earth did not crumble. Reports filtered through the Union network. Rumors of human ingenuity, of hidden resource operations, of technologies that the Union had never approved but that were working to sustain Earth. Humanity had become a force of determination and resilience, an unstoppable drive that refused to yield. Then, one fateful day, a group of Union diplomats attempted to negotiate with Earth. They arrived, expecting humanity to finally be weakened, to be ready to submit. But as they sat across from Rachel Park, they found a leader whose resolve had only strengthened. "Ambassador Park," one of the diplomats began, choosing his words carefully, "the Council is willing to reconsider Earth's position in the Union if you agree to suspend your operations and rejoin the Union under our guidance." Rachel regarded him with a calm but unyielding gaze. "We've come this far on our own. Why should we return now, just to be told to wait again?" "Because," the diplomat replied, his voice wavering, "the Union maintains balance. To act alone threatens that balance. If you defy the Union, it will lead to chaos." Rachel's voice was cold as she replied, "Balance? Tell me, where was that balance when Earth begged for help and was met with silence? Where was it when our people went hungry, when our resources ran dry?" The diplomat was silent, unable to respond. Rachel leaned forward, her voice fierce. "We no longer seek your permission. Earth will operate as it sees fit. You can either recognize us as equals, as partners, or you can continue your blockade and watch as we survive without you." The diplomats left in silence, their mission failed. In the weeks that followed, the Union Council convened to discuss Earth's defiance once more. Rumors spread across the galaxy, stories of humanity's resilience, of their refusal to bend. Other species watched with a mix of admiration and trepidation. Some wondered if they, too, had been too reliant on the Union's slow-moving system. Finally, under pressure from within and without, the Union made a decision that would reshape the galaxy forever. They recognized Earth's autonomy, allowing humanity to gather resources and build independently without interference. It was a historic shift, a tacit admission that the Union's authority had limits. The blockade lifted, and humanity's ships continued their work openly. The Union representatives returned to their worlds, carrying stories of humanity's unbreakable spirit. Across the stars, species who had long felt voiceless took notice, and the Union, once a symbol of ultimate authority, began to change. In the years that followed, humanity's defiance became a legend, a reminder of what could happen when an entire species reached its breaking point. And the galaxy never forgot the moment when humanity finally lost its patience.